This is The Art of Startup War, and I am your host, Brian McMahon. I am the sensei here at Expert Dojo, the fastest growing startup accelerator in Southern California. Now, in the first 2 seasons, we answered your questions about how to find investment for your business. We brought in the most accomplished investors in startup in America. You can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Now, here in season 3, we're flipping the script. We're going to hear real stories from entrepreneurs who are in the trenches today. In these episodes, we're going to take our guests through the storytelling model called the entrepreneur's journey. We'll hear about what sparked their call to entrepreneurship, help they received along the way, forces they overcame, dark times and revelations. So join us every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Start the week a smarter entrepreneur. Morning, it's Brian here at Expert Dojo. We are talking, as we always talk about, startups. Brilliant startups, to be specific, companies that are changing the world. But to your point, all of you folks, good folks who are listening, we are trying to understand the journey of those startups through the investment process, which of course takes you a little bit deeper into their space as well. And this morning, I have a man that I've known for years, actually. Right, Jose?
Yeah, about probably 2.5 years now since.
2.5 years since you first came through the dojo, which is awesome. So Jose from Blue, which is a phenomenal social networking app. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the app in a second and kind of what makes it so special. But firstly, just going back to those early days, what possessed you to want to start a business?
You know, growing up, I would definitely, give credit to my father. He's, growing up, I've seen him start multiple businesses and go into like the field and be successful with his business and then go into corporate field. So growing up, I've always kind of been around it. And during elementary school, I always used to, sell chips and candy and Mexican candy in elementary school, and then started, selling shirts in high school and just different things. Just always trying to find a way to make money, I guess. But I always just knew that I wanted to do something different rather than just the regular 9 to 5. I just couldn't really see myself going that way.
Yeah, and I think those of you listening who've had dads who are entrepreneurs, you're so damn fortunate because you get brought into a world which most other people don't get to see. Most other people are taught, hey, I'm just going to get a job, I'll stay in that job, and then hopefully I'll die before it becomes too miserable. Like, I'm biased. You guys all know that. But what was the biggest thing you learned from your dad?
The biggest thing I learned was perseverance, never giving up. He told me that the first 97% of businesses die off within the first 3 years. If you can make it past that, then you have a chance. If you keep going,
it's true. But there's a fine line. I always remember hearing that the great point about, we always say, well, we learn from our mistakes, but only if we reflect. So I really want to talk, because especially since we're talking about like the 2.5. How long has Blue been running for?
We started it, incorporated 2016, but started the idea in 2015.
Okay, cool. So it's just over 3 years.
Just over 3 years.
So I want to, as we get deeper into the podcast, I want to really understand about the reflections that you've had from doing things. And by the way, for everybody listening, as an entrepreneur, there is no flawless roadmap to success. It just doesn't exist. Anyone who says they have one, our advisor who says they can teach you one, you should run, okay? That's not out there. What happens is we start our business, maybe we know like 13, 14% of what it's going to be, and then we build it, right?
Right, exactly.
And you went through that same journey.
Right, yeah, and it was quite interesting, when I decided to pursue this opportunity in summer 2015. I just recently quit my job as a manager at LA Fitness. And, when this idea came to me, I really didn't really know how I was going to do. I just knew that this was an idea that if I don't do this, someone else will. So I was like, why not it be me?
But what was the idea? Like, when did it hit you, and what was it?
Yeah, so the idea came to me in 2012. I was attending Riverside Community College, and I made a few interesting observations. The first observation I made was when I was walking around campus, I noticed, Brian, that students weren't really socializing, but yet they were glued to their smartphones on social media.
Yeah.
And it started to make me think, is social media really making us less social? right? Now that we could get these likes and these comments from all around the world. And so I
sure.
started seeing, a change in behavior and just with people around me. The second observation I made was that every time I made a new friend, instead of them being like, "Hey, Brian, what's your phone number?" they'd be like, "Hey, Brian, are you on Instagram? Are you on Facebook?" And it was interesting that people started asking for usernames and social media more than phone numbers.
Mm.
And the third interesting observation I made that I think kind of just hit home with me was when I was sitting in class. And I remember one day I was sitting in class and I was just looking around at all these other students who are in the same class, like 50 other students. But what blew my mind was that I knew they were all on social media, yet I was in the room and I had no idea who they were.
Yeah.
And
Because it's so big and vast
right.
and actually non-personal.
Right, exactly. And just the idea that they're on social media and there's no way to like get that information. I knew there had to be a better way to connect.
Okay,
And
so your light bulb was,
that,
let's create a platform that allows people to actually find each other and create interactions immediately.
right. And so I wrote the idea down in 2012 and I usually just write down ideas and I forget about it.
Uh-huh.
So I wrote it down in 2012 and didn't do anything with it for the next 3 years. And I went in and did more personal development myself, went into sales, went into management during that time. And then it came back to me.
Mm. And then what did you do? How did you get it started? Because you need seed money, you're kicking off the
Right.
business, and let's move to like the topic of this podcast, which is almost the evolution of how you raise the money to make sure that
Right.
your company can grow. So you knew you had to build it, you knew there was an app involved, which means that you have to build an iOS and you have to build an Android. So you got to make
Correct.
sure it's applicable to Android and Apple for those of you who just don't
Right.
know what I'm talking about. But it's expensive, right? Those things are not cheap. So how did you go about convincing the stakeholders that were going to be in your business that they should help you fund the development of this?
Right. So when I made the decision in summer 2015, and I went through like the ideas in my notes because I knew I wanted to do something, right? I didn't know what it was. So I went through all my ideas. And when I was scrolling through all the ideas in my notes, I came across this idea, blue. And when I came across it, it was so strange, but I got like this instant chills down my spine, this is it. I don't know what it was, but just something was telling me this was it. And I was with my best friend Lewis at the time, and I told Lewis the idea, and he's like, "Dude, like that's a great idea, but how are you gonna do it? You don't know tech, you don't know how to build a company, you've never built a mobile app before,
Yeah.
right?" And what I said to him was that, Lewis, I don't need to know how, I just need to know why. And my why and what's driving me is really my family, my parents. My mom's a RN, works graveyard shifts every night, and just seeing her come home every morning and just super tired. I don't want her going through that, and to be able to get her out of that, I got to be able to do something extraordinary.
You got to do it for yourself.
You got to do
a
it for
job
myself.
does not help take your family to
Right.
the level you want to.
Exactly, exactly. And so, I focused on my why rather than the how because for all the other ideas that I've had, Brian, I always wondered how I was going to do it. And because I was always having that question in my mind, how,
Yeah.
I never started.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people's problem is. They worry too much about how rather than their why and let their why power drive them and to do unimaginable things. And so when I decided to do this, I just started doing research. And I hired, after doing some research, I hired my first tech company in Mexico through this guy. And it turns out, it didn't work out the way I thought. I paid him
Yeah.
money and he didn't deliver a product. And,
And for those people listening, this is very normal in the tech space. Like if you're starting a anything which is an app, like a website, you got some chance, but with an app, the chances are like 70, 80% that the first job that you're going to get is going to be semi-botched. And it will be botched because of, either remote ones are particularly hard, but a lot of the time you don't have a choice, right? Because you
Right.
need to get it done for a particular price. And actually, in some ways, I was going to sound weird, but it's kind of okay that it was botched because you needed to see what that felt
Right.
like, so which gave you the ideas to build your real platform.
Right, exactly. And so that kind of happened. So I really wanted to find some local developers, people that I can meet up in person and talk to in person. And I feel like that's a very strong characteristic to have within a team is to have a lot of in-person interactions.
I agree.
And so for a whole month after that, I was searching for developers, interviewing developers back to back, and I was telling everyone, like my idea, and they were like, all the developers that I talked to said GPS, GPS, GPS. And
As a way of connecting with people.
As a way of connecting and
why do they
discovering
say it? So
people.
why do they feel it's GPS as opposed to, Bluetooth or anything else?
Well, I think they were saying GPS because these were not so great developers, and that's what everyone builds their platform on.
Yeah.
And when I came across my developers today, what's interesting is when I met with them, I was sitting in Farmer Boys. It was me and my father and our development team, which is Eric and Lauren Ocean. They're a husband and wife tech team who've worked with Apple, Google, Nike, Kellogg's.
Yeah, it's a good pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
Always look for good pedigree, by the way, when you get in development companies.
Exactly.
Good, okay.
And so we were sitting down at Farmer Boys, and I said, Eric, I see that gentleman sitting across the table from us. How can I see information about him, or how can I alert him that I want to be social? And what he said next completely changed my paradigm and the way I thought about Bluetooth. So he brought up Bluetooth and said, yeah, we can use Bluetooth low energy, to be able to connect the devices to discover the person or even to send an alert. So I thought that was a very interesting thing because all the other developers I talked to were like GPS, GPS, GPS.
Yeah. And just for the uninitiated on the call, what's the difference between GPS and Bluetooth, both from a customer experience perspective and also from building it?
Right. So GPS uses location, so kind of like Waze or Maps. It's very battery draining, and it shows your location at all times if you have it running. With Bluetooth, what's very sweet about Bluetooth is Bluetooth low energy, and it doesn't need to go to a server, so it could go phone to phone, peer to peer, without having to go up to the server and talk. And so that was very interesting that he brought that up because some of our target markets not only is campuses but also festivals and concerts where there's not great cellular activity.
Yeah.
So that way people could be able to connect at these events as well.
Cool. Okay, makes sense. How did you get the money for this? So you've worked out your new team. You've worked out what you're going to get. The new team, obviously, if they've worked for Apple and Google and those folks, they're going to charge a reasonable amount of money. I'm sure not over the top, but I'm sure not too cheap either.
Correct.
So what did you do for money?
So what I did after we got the scope of work laid out and like our development plans and everything like that, I put together a business plan and me and my team worked together on a business plan and put it together. And what we were doing was a friends and family round, and this was 2016, October 2016. So I pretty much dedicated a whole month and a half to raising funds for friends and family. Within that 30 days, I met with probably over 30, 40, 50 people. We hosted even our own event at UCR where we had about 50 people, friends and family.
Okay,
come.
I want to stay on this for a second. Actually, one of the things, this particular podcast, I want everyone to learn exactly what is the process when you're doing friends and family. So friends and family obviously start with your dad, moves it to his brother, moves to like your cousins, moves to people who are in college and all the other areas. Right. I want to talk about the presentations that you did to friends and family. And then I also want to talk to you about like how did you arrange those initial meetings or those first awkward conversations? Because the one thing is saying, hey, dude, I need like 50K.
Right.
And another thing is actually somebody not putting down the phone on you. So you were successful doing it. So take me through the process.
Yeah, so after I put together like the presentation and our business plan, I really just I laid out a list of everybody I knew, whether I thought they would invest or not. I believe in this opportunity, and so after I made the list of over like 150 people, I just started calling and just like letting them know what I was up to, my new venture. And this wasn't my first time kind of doing that. I did multi-level marketing back when I was 18 and did something similar. Didn't work out so well, but I got the experience of cold calling friends up, people up. So I was a little bit more comfortable on my end when I was.
What did you say?
It.
Because this is pivotal. 95% of everybody I know who's looking for investment, they start it by email. email sucks.
Email sucks.
Sucks for a relationship. It's okay to send follow-on information through if you want to, but the very first thing, it has to be a conversation. If it's face-to-face, even better, right?
Right.
But it has to be
just a conversation.
Mano a
exactly.
mano.
So it's not when I called him up and I was going through my list. It wasn't I was asking him for 25 grand or 50 grand over the phone. It was more like, hey, like, I want to get lunch, or I want to meet for some coffee. I want to share what I've been working on. It's some really exciting idea, and we have a plan. And I just want to share this opportunity with you because you're my friend and you're my family, and I don't want you to miss out on this opportunity, kind of thing.
Beautiful.
And and if you do truly believe in your idea, you shouldn't feel bad for reaching out to friends and family. And I think if you feel bad, then you don't have a full belief in your product or yourself that you could really accomplish
I
it.
agree with you. And by the way, it's uncomfortable, right? Because you're calling people that probably they can't always afford to lose the money, right? And you're calling them for a relatively risky venture because it's an early stage startup. I mean, just anyone, right? And it's just a hard thing to do. But if you absolutely believe in your product and you're willing to do whatever it takes to actually make it successful, then you have to start there. And venture capitalists and angels respect that afterwards, that you started it there. Who was the first person to give?
It was actually my uncle.
Okay.
My uncle, he came in with an investment, and then after that, I just had like tons of actually my friends, very close friends, even putting like 1,000 or 15, and then their parents coming in and their relatives coming in, to where I had about 22 friends and family put money into this idea and really believe in us, and which was quite, like it was amazing, and I was astonished that people believed in me and believed in this idea that we could really build this product. And for that to happen, I really am excited that they're in this now, and they have the opportunity to grow and watch us grow as these years go by.
They're part of it. Like, you turn this into $100 million, $200 million business, and they're not all become millionaires, but they certainly, they do insanely well out of it, right? And a few people will. So the cap table is a slight challenge, right? Because if you have lots of people on the cap table, sometimes investors have a little bit of an issue with that.
Right.
How did you deal with that afterwards?
Yeah, so we worked with some lawyers, Pivotal Law and Benjamin Deerdick, and what we did was we didn't issue voting stock, so it was common B stock.
Cool.
So they have no voting rights. They just are more passive investing.
Yeah, and I'm going to say why this is important. You don't want to have 350 folks who've all got an opinion on your business telling you what to do. It's not. And as an investor, you might think, well, Brian, of course we need to know what's happening with. If we have 350 CEOs, then you got no CEOs, right? The company dies. So it's important as a CEO to make sure that if you're going to have lots of investors coming in, then those investors are really clear. You're trusting me to be the CEO of the company. I'm going to sail the ship. I'm the man behind the wheel, and you're going to join us. And I value your advice and your assistance and your help and everything else, but you got to trust me to be the man in charge.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well done. Very good.
Yeah, and after like having them come in, now it's like getting to work and building the product and the business.
Okay, good. Who are your big detractors at this stage? So right now, this is the beginning of your life cycle. There are lots of people who are supporting you, helping you. You got like 20 odd people on your cap table, which is amazing. But who was it? There's always people out there the Debbie Downers, who want to tell you why it's not going to work. And some of them, obviously the first development company was one of those, not what they said, but what they did.
Right.
But tell me other detractors away from the path.
So I guess, well, one of them, one of the biggest things was, obviously getting my parents, like letting them and like hoping they believe and would support this idea. So when I first initially told them the idea, they just kind of brushed it off and didn't really think of anything. And so that kind of like fueled me even more to even start paying and start using money to start building this. And so when that started happening and I was putting money towards it, I actually set up a whole presentation for my family, and I sat everyone in the living room and I presented to them this idea.
Good for you. Yeah.
After that, they started believing. Another, I guess, what can really take you off path is, when I started this, Brian, I thought 6 months after I started this that I would be out, I could shake my hands and my deed is done, right? But man, 2.5 years later, it just shows how, great things take time and the process of the building and these overnight successes that you hear of, Snapchat, Instagram, Uber, really were years in the making. But, overnight they just kind of blew up because they found product market fit or
Yeah, and also
something,
these were
right?
a bunch of rich kids whose mommy and daddy helped them build their nice little businesses. So look, God bless them.
Right,
But if I've got a couple of $1 million in my back pocket, it's pretty easy to build $1 million business. You're
right,
building it from a different place. You're building it from a great product fit, coming to market, and getting customer adoption, which takes a
right,
little bit of time. Did you have any
right.
great mentors at that time?
Yeah, actually, one of my mentors was Alan Lewis. He was one of the mentors at SBDC, and
Hmm.
it was free mentorship, but he really provided a lot of value in the early stages and helped guide me. And then you, Brian, coming
Yeah,
here 2.5 years ago, this was
that's
my
true.
first place, that I went to because there was nothing out in Riverside at the time. And, I was making a drive out here because I wanted to be here. I wanted to be in the space that you built, and all the entrepreneurs was just, amazing to be involved in or surrounded by that kind of ecosystem. Because, in Riverside, it does get a little lonely.
It's hard,
But
it's true, but that also shows the dedication, the perseverance you talked about earlier on. Like
right,
traveling from Riverside, if you're in LA, you know what that's like. If you're not in LA, let me tell you, you're traveling for like an hour and a half. It could be up to 3 hours each way if you get some nasty traffic
yeah,
stopping you in the middle. So I always believe, as an entrepreneur, and we're all entrepreneurs, is what are you prepared to pay? What is it? What's the give up? There's always a payment. It's never for free. So, what is it
hmm
you're giving? So, for you to say, I'll be there no matter what, extreme ownership, I will
hmm
be in whatever place I need to be at the time, is huge. And I've never known you to miss that. Okay, so we've built our way through. You've started building the product, you've put it together, you've found a better development team, you've raised the investment through friends and family brilliantly. Only two things for people to remember: phone calls and actual presentations.
yep,
Don't go to your buddy Johnny with a beer down the pub and say, listen, man, let me tell you, that shit doesn't work. You got to sit him down in a place of focus. And then you got to show him how he can benefit financially from being a part. But you've also got to share with Johnny the challenges and then the issues that could come from his money. And that the second he invested, the money is lost. And then
exactly,
afterwards it comes
exactly.
back. Okay, so we've gone through who your mentors were. Actually, before we pass mentors, tell me one thing that Alan taught you. I'm sure I didn't teach you anything, but what did Alan teach you?
So Alan was really, he really, what he taught me was, to really try to understand the customers a lot more, um, and to, not always listen to what don't listen to everyone.
Yeah,
And he was saying that was like one of his biggest mistakes was he was getting opinions from everyone, and
opinions are like assholes.
yeah,
Everybody's got one. Yeah,
exactly. And he would change his product on that, but he mentioned to stay focused and yeah, get opinions, but don't change the product just based off one opinion.
yeah.
Use facts and statistics and
And your
measurements.
customer, like you said, once you start building, then follow what your customers are telling you. Okay, so you've come through, you've got your mentorship, you've built your product, you're ready to go. What happened then? You start deployment. How long ago was this? And tell me what happened.
Right. So the first iteration of our product, we launched, I would say, March or no, probably like close to October 2016. Um, During the same time I was raising the funds actually, and when we launched, that was actually we had our first product, and it was just the MVP of the product, which was to prove and to answer two questions. One, will our technology work, which was built on Bluetooth passive to passive connections, and two, will people even download it?
Yeah.
So we released October 28th. This was Halloween weekend, and I remember it
Which year?
vaguely. 2016.
16. Sorry. Yeah. Go on.
And so when we launched it, we did a live video, and we launched it. And what I didn't realize, when you press the launch button on iTunes and the Apple App Store, they have to approve it, and it takes some time to show up on the App Store. So
Sometimes a lot of time.
yeah, yeah. And so we did a whole live thing, and everyone was asking, hey, I can't find it. Hey, I can't find it. And I was like, oh no, like this isn't how it's supposed to work out. But it was probably closer to midnight when someone texted me like, I found it, it's on. And then after that, within one day, we had over 500 downloads.
Wow.
And we're using it, and was just, it's just started gaining momentum. And I remember going out that weekend. I was just so excited. Me and my friends went out, and we were pretty much sharing the idea with all these college students at these, at a little party, Halloween weekend, right? And everyone was like loving the idea, downloading it. And one of the biggest things that I saw myself doing was the fact that I had to I found myself handing my phone to share the app with them one-on-one in person, right? And I knew like at that moment I had to figure out a better way.
Yeah.
And then that's when I kind of came across AirDrop. But the whole point and like the validation of the product was happening. We went to like UCR, and one day at UCR we had over 200 students there download it that week, and we're using it. And then we went to UCI, tested it there.
Yeah. So University College Riverside, University College Irvine.
Yep. Right. And we didn't just want to test students. We also wanted to test professional markets. So we went into Crowd Invest Summit. We went into and set up booths at several other events and conventions. And each time we were going, we were amazed that actually people were downloading. And every time we had 200 to 400 downloads at each event. And the crazy thing is, we didn't talk to 200 to 400 people. We maybe touched 50, and then it started spreading at the event. So it was just amazing to see like this viral kind of factor in it. But then, because it was just the first version, there was no experience.
Yeah.
It was just pure utility.
So it's hard to keep retention, right? They use it, they get excited, they do the event, and then they're gone.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So what did you do?
So then we validated those two questions, and next we wanted to build an experience, right? What type of experience is it that we want to build? And I was thinking, and it kind of goes back to the idea of people not being as social, right? The big question was, how can we use technology to encourage people to be more social in person, right? And so I was thinking, if we have to build Bluetooth and the notifications into the application, right, how can we really induce that behavior? And so the next version that we actually released was more of a swipe style. So we kind of took the idea from Tinder and all these dating apps out there and did it more for a swipe style. So if I discovered you, Brian, I could discover you and I could swipe right, and then you'll get a notification saying Jose wants to be introduced.
Even if I don't have your app?
When you do have to have the app and be on the network. And so that whole idea was to show more intention. And so we released that in 2018 or 2017, and now we're like close to 10,000 users. We started getting a lot of users, but what I observed at these conferences and observing the students with the second version, I noticed students weren't being social in person. So I asked them, and I asked multiple of them, like, hey, you discovered Brian, why didn't you walk up and be social? And what they said, Brian, was, well, Jose, I discovered him, but I have no idea where they are. Bluetooth could be 500 feet that way, in front of you, to the left, to the right. It could be in all directions. And so I went back to my developer and told him, and he was saying we could use signal strength, Bluetooth signal strength to determine how far or close they were.
So I don't want to get too technical because we're going to lose some people, right? But I just want to focus on a really important area that we're at right now. So the beginning part of this podcast was all about how do we create the right product fit by finding a need that's in the world? How do we then go to our friends and family, which is the place that most of us get that initial seed funding from, and position it in a way to be able to get investment through our friends and family. Jose is an expert at this and obviously has shown that and how he approached it and how he dealt with it. This part of it is really the most challenging part of a business, which is where you got to let your ego go, and your ego being telling you, well, I've created the greatest product in the world. No, I've created the greatest beginning of a product in the world, and I have to keep on listening to customers. So the continual focus of everything Jose is saying is, I went to my customers. I asked them. I went back to my customers. I asked them. I changed it. I reflected, I'm sorry. Then I changed it. Then I went back to my customers and I asked them again, and all the way through. So right now, and this is all for the purpose of two things. Two things based on a realization, right? The realization is that you need to have 1 million users so that enough people are on the platform on a regular daily basis that I can just be sitting because the real dream is that you finish this podcast, you go over to the Cheesecake Factory, you open up the app, and there's 25 people around you, all which have the app, and then you pick up some business guy who happens to be an investor, and maybe they happen to be a marketing person, and you send him a ping and say, hey dude, I see you're a marketing person, would love to chat with you for 10 minutes, I see you're over in the bar here,
Exactly.
I'm over here if you want to talk. It's awesome for that, right? So our underlying requirement now is we need to go from 10,000 users to 1 million users, right? And to do that, two things have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is the user experience has got to be as human-centrically perfect as possible, right?
Correct.
And you're already following that path, and it's beautiful to see where you are. And there will be further iterations in the future as people feed back, but you're already deep enough in to know that you've created something which people really want. The second thing that's going to happen is going to be you have to get investment, right? Because it is impossible unless you're one of these schmucks who's got a rich mommy and daddy who's going to create an Instagram or a Snapchat or something else. Then you got to do this thing yourself, and if you're going to do it yourself, you got to convince a educated, institutional, recurring investor that they have got a better opportunity of getting investment back from you than they have from any other entrepreneurs out there, right? So it moves from an emotional argument to a logical argument.
Right.
So you're at that stage right now. Talk to me a little bit about the investors that you've reached out to. Talk a little bit about the experiences that you've had, and then talk a bit about the road going forward.
Yeah. So I've reached out to a lot of investors, Tech Coast Angels, Pasadena Angels, a few private investors as well. And, their feedback, like you said, I was kind of going towards this business model that was too a little ahead of its time, right? However, they still saw the vision that, there's a potential here. There's a potential, right? So it really goes back to what is, the fundamental business model and how, we could really start making money with this product right now.
It also goes back to what the investors really care about,
and
right?
what they care
so
about,
you've
right.
mentioned two large angel groups here, but they're two very conservative angel groups.
Correct.
So Pasadena Angels, it's got nothing to do with your product. It's just if they don't see revenue for like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month, or if they don't see masses of users, like hundreds of thousands, they just won't entertain a platform, right?
Right.
Tech Coast Angels are, again, kind of similarly quite conservative, use that, or traditional in the way that they go for it. So the types of investors you're going to look for, and again, this is my advice to everybody listening as well, is the more we're educated on what our investors are actually doing, the better a chance that we have of actually being successful. It's a different world from the friends and family because we need to tap into where they are right now. So the bigger question becomes, how do you find the investors who are interested in social networks, our event type networks, our meeting people type networks, whether it's somebody who's invested in a meetup before or meetup.com, or whether it's somebody else. And then how do you approach those people, and what's your plan over the next 3 months to do that? Because this is your pivotal time, right? This is your make or make.
Yeah, exactly. Make it or break it. So, what's interesting is, because we're blue, right? Actually, back in 2017, 2016, we were trying to buy this website, blue.com.
Yeah.
So we sent the guy an email, and he responds, and he's like, $300,000 to buy it. So, of course, we were like, nope.
Yeah.
So we got a different domain. The reason why I bring that up, because about 1.5 years after that, 2 years, in doing research in this industry, I came across this article by this guy named James Carrier. James Carrier owns this venture fund, and they invest in this. They have what they call NFX Guild, which invests all in technologies, platform technology, and network effects. And what was interesting was when I was reading that article, because it has to do with everything with what we're building.
Yeah.
James Carrier actually mentioned some of the domains that he had, and one of them being blue.com. So the fact that, we're building this platform, I was reading and studying his work without even knowing he was blue.com and
Mm-hmm.
owns blue.com, made me, realize like, maybe that's the guy I want to go for.
Yep,
And, I
good.
want to get on the team
There's
and
an
can really,
alignment.
yeah, an alignment and
Very
bring
good.
value. And so, so the way like I'm kind of
Almost like divine intervention.
right.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Like, I
So
look
you
forward.
approached him, did you?
So I went to San Francisco
Yeah.
and, I found his address, but I walked around the building and had no idea like where I was. I ended up in a WeWork,
Yeah.
but I knew he wasn't there and didn't get a chance to meet him. However, I knew someday and I know one day I'll be able to have the chance to sit down with them. And the way I'm kind of going about it, actually, one of this other gentlemen that I met, Tim Draper, I actually met him at the Global Venture Summit.
Yeah, from Draper
And
University, yeah.
and I told him about Blue, and what I knew as well was this company Looped, who's one of our competitors for the professional conference and convention space, and they sell beacons that you wear around your neck for the conferences and for the attendees to connect. So I knew Looped came out of Draper University.
Yeah.
So when I was talking to Tim, I mentioned Looped and I mentioned what we're doing and how what we're building. You don't need physical beacons.
Yeah.
We're just using smartphones.
Hardware is tough.
Exactly, and we're just using smartphones. And so I told him that, and he's like, Jose, like, email me, and in the email say, this is the app to meet people at bars.
Yeah.
So the next morning, this was November, I decided to send him an email, a couple paragraphs. Didn't get a response, but then he had one of his, I guess, director of investments there at Draper University, started following me on social media. So I knew he received the email and he got in and he told this gentleman to keep an eye.
Yeah, I think it's probably been a long time since he's been responding to his own emails. Yeah,
Right.
because for those of you who don't know Tim Draper, like, he's a pretty big guy, one of the biggest guys in Bitcoin in the world. His dad's dad had the first venture firm up there. And he's got his own huge venture firm, which is many hundreds of millions of dollars.
Exactly.
But he hasn't responded, right?
So he didn't respond. However, coming in December, I was online, and for some reason I was on Draper University and their website and just like reading about them. And I was about to click, the X and to exit out of that page, but then something just told me, just apply. Like I know thousands of entrepreneurs apply from around the world, but it doesn't hurt to take 5 minutes. So took 5 minutes out of my day and kind of just went on the whim and applied.
Yep.
And didn't really think of anything. And about 3 weeks later, they sent me an email saying they wanted to do an interview. So I did a video chat interview with this lady, Alexandra.
And what happened? Fast forward. Give me the end bit.
Yeah, she loved it. She loved the idea and ended up getting us admitted and accepted into Draper University. So we'll be attending the blockchain and token course April 1st through May 4th. And the reason why I bring this up is because,
Did you get money for that or anything?
No, we have to pay. We paid.
How much did you pay?
It was 11 grand to pay.
Okay.
And the reason why, I believe and the 11 grand does seem like a lot, but in long term, it's an investment. And like you said, how do I get in front of those right people who are in this space, who knows what we do? And so the reason why we're going there, right, is not just to learn and to learn about the blockchain and token, but to really make the connections and the contacts. I know Tim Draper went and works with James Courier.
So I'm gonna fast forward this a little bit, because here's what's really brilliant about this conversation, right? We've got, and for some are on Instagram, so you can see Jose. Many people are listening to this podcast as well, but so you don't see him, right? But you have 3 real characteristics for any startup to be successful. You got the one is you got to be able to get whatever you need at the beginning to get your idea off the ground, right? It's a huge characteristic no matter what your idea is, but we have to assume the idea is good and you have to have the ability to do that. The second one is that you have to be able to create an incredible user experience. It's just key and fundamental to everyone. Right. An amazing user experience with a pretty mediocre product will kick the crap out of an amazing product with a terrible user experience. So the user experience is the absolute key to success within business, right? You have nailed the first one. I think everybody on this podcast listening to you will have been taking notes of the way that you approach friends and family, the specific and very measured way that you did it with individual people, with specific meetings. You closed it very quickly. It didn't drag on. You moved on to your product, right? Everybody will also be listening to, and they will have heard your product, and they'll say, yeah, it makes a huge amount of sense. Man, I want to be able to just sit in a bar, cafe, restaurant, football field, anything, and be able to have people around me who can actually do it. And obviously, LinkedIn doesn't do it very well. There's still a huge open world and an open gap to try and do this. And Blue are well positioned to do it, right?
Correct.
You've listened to your customers. You've got yourself to a really good place. The final area, which is the area that I think you need most help, and we're going to rewind back to this in about 6 months' time, is actually doing what you did with your friends and family with the angel community around the United States. Will Draper University be the solution? I don't know. I don't know, right? They're a class course, General Assembly, like everybody else is. But outside that, I'm going to throw some advice in on what you should do. I think you should get a list of 100, 150 individuals. I think you should spend a month researching the most likely people to go after. You look them up in Dubai, you look them up in London, you look them up in Chicago, you look them up in Europe. I don't care where they are. You look for relevance in the same way that you looked for relevance in your family. Like, you didn't ask your niece who's 4 years old because that's not a relevant person to go after for investment. Right. You knew your uncle was going to be a better one to go after. It's the same with angels. If somebody invested in meetup.com, if somebody invested in eventbrite.com, if somebody invested in events.com, if somebody invested in Facebook, if somebody invested in LinkedIn, those people are very normal people to start your list with. Then you start moving to the venture capital firms and you start looking at the companies that they've invested into, right? Even if they're further ahead than your stage, it doesn't matter. You put them down on a level of probability. I don't care if you do it in a CRM system or if you do it on an Excel spreadsheet. You actually do that. Then you start looking for people who are in industries that are similar to the industry that you're in. So it could be somebody who's in, for example, entertainment, right? It doesn't have to be as direct as just, it's somebody who's in events. It could be entertainment, but they're extremely high up in entertainment. And you start building mentors from people who are speaking at conferences in areas that you're in. You outreach them a meetup. Hey, I would love to talk to you. I've built this app. It's going to be really important. And you build a list of 150 people. And then you contact those people through LinkedIn Navigator, which, by the way, everybody should have. Or you reach out to them through direct tweets. Or you reach out to them by going up to their offices. Or you reach out to them by going on their website. Or you go onto Email Hunter or somewhere else and you find their damn email. And you start with those 150 people. And you break them down into 4 or 5 categories. Category number 1, outreach to. Category number 2, said no straight out after you trying to convince them. Category number 3, waiting for email conversation back. Category number 4, in conversation. Category number 5, 70% hot. And you dedicate the next 2 months to doing nothing else. Forget development of the app, forget working on users, forget on everything. You have a 6-month period of time that you need to raise $1 million and you have to get this out so it's in the hands of 200,000-300,000 people. That's it. You have a great product, but you have to be a beast with these people. And by the way, every single thing I've told you doesn't cost you one single dime. Not a dime. Okay?
And I appreciate that.
That's cool. So let's finish this podcast off. I want you just to share with everybody who's listening, kind of for you, what your advice is to entrepreneurs everywhere. And then second, I want to make sure that everybody can contact you and that they understand from Blue. So from everything you've learned in the last 3.5, 4 years, actually from 2012.
From 2012.
Your biggest piece of advice that's your reflection on what you did for entrepreneurs listening to avoid that.
I would say my biggest advice would not focus on how and focus on your why, and to just make a decision. You know, the day I decided to do Blue, you know, I knew I had to burn the ships and make this happen. And what's interesting is the word decision comes from the Latin root word incision, which means to cut away. So when you decide to do something, whether it's deciding to be healthy, deciding, you know, to build a business or to build a product or deciding to do school, don't just go and touch your toes in it. You got to decide and jump head first.
Jump in the pool.
And hope for the best. And
it's great advice because we're all in. Like, there's no each way bet here.
Right.
We might go back and take a job someday. Like, who the fuck is going to hire me ever? Like, not going to happen, right? And you've put yourself in a place where you've got higher expectations now. And then finally, how can everybody download Blue? Where can they find it? And then secondly, how can they contact you?
Yeah, so our second version right now is available in the Apple App Store. If you just type in Blue and then search, it'll be one of the first ones up there. It's a name tag icon. So for those on the podcast, just look for a name tag, virtual name tag. You can find me on Instagram at Jose Montero, Facebook, LinkedIn, Jose Montero as well. So
okay, beautiful. Okay, all you investors out there, you got his name, you got his details. Check out the app. You'll love it the same as I do. One last thing.
Yeah. Also, my email is jose@blue.social. So if you want to reach out and ask a few more questions, or if you're an entrepreneur out there looking for some advice, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to share what I've learned to help you avoid the mistakes that I've made.
BLUE.social.
Yep.
Jose, Jose. Okay, beautiful. Jose, it's been a pleasure the last 2.5 years. The next 2.5 years are going to be awesome. We're going to work with you. We're going to find this friggin' $1 million or $2 million we got to get to turn this into having 1 million subscribers all around the world.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for joining us. If you love the podcast, please empower your circle by sharing these stories. The Art of Startup War is brought to you by Expert Dojo. And remember, we invest in startups, $50,000 checks. Make sure you apply on our site if you are one of those great entrepreneurs looking to bring your company to the next level. As far as the Art of Startup War is concerned, we are back every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. So remember, check out the new episodes. If you want to find out what the investors think, check out season 1 or 2. But make sure you join us every single week.